Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Data Playbook. This is the last preview for Sunday because it covers Sunday Night Football, which is the Chiefs at the Giants. So let's jump into it. So, starting with our main team page of Kansas City playing New York, you have your money lines as usual, favoring the Chiefs here, more so than a lot of the games today. The spread being 6 points, and the total point line at 44.5. Interesting enough, you have Kansas City at a passing and rushing rank of both 17. And meanwhile, the Giants are the best passing team in the league. If we look at that, the Giants have 309 passing yards on average per game, which is pretty impressive. But I believe most of that came from the last game, and we'll take a look at that in more detail. They also averaged 79 rushing yards per game, have had one interception this season, and suffered 2.5 sacks on average per game. The Chiefs have had 225 average passing yards per game, an average of 109.5 rushing yards per game, one passing interception, and 2 sacks suffered on average per game. Looking at the defense, you get 3.5 QB hits per game versus 6 QB hits per game for the Giants. The Giants have had one defensive interception, while Kansas City has had none. There are, on average, 5.5 passes defended by New York, while there's only 3 on average from Kansas City. New York gets on average 3 sacks per game, while Kansas City only gets on average 2 sacks per game. So looking at the quarterbacks in more detail, you have Mahomes with 48.1 fantasy points and Russell Wilson with 41.4 fantasy points. You have Mahomes, I think the biggest difference, getting more rushing yards with 61.5 on average per a game, and Russell Wilson only getting 33.5 per game, both which are above average for quarterbacks, I think. You have 225 average passing yards, as we saw before, and 309 average passing yards, as we saw before as well. But at the top, we have one passing interception for both of them, 4 sacks suffered for Mahomes, 5 for Russell Wilson. But that's really it. Russell Wilson's had a couple fumbles, but they have not been lost. So comparably, they look somewhat similar with just more passing yards for Russell Wilson. But if we look at them here, there's 258 passing yards for week 1 for Mahomes, 187 for week 2 for Mahomes against Philly, a tough Philly team. So Mahomes actually looks still pretty good for what he's faced, and the Chargers are doing really well. Meanwhile, you have Washington and Dallas. Dallas being a good team, but 450 passing yards in that game versus 168. So that definitely brings up the average. I guess we'll see what Russell Wilson does in this game and how that averages out. I don't expect another 450-yard game against the Chiefs, but you never know. And taking a look at the primary running backs, you have Pachenko, who doesn't have much of anything for fantasy points. And even Cam is pretty low for a running back at this point. So we have the fantasy points, and then we look at the fumbles. There's nothing that they've lost, both receiving and rushing, for both of them. On average, Pachenko gets 23.5 rushing yards per game and 5 receiving yards per game. On average, Cam gets 21 rushing yards per game and 13 receiving yards per game. Looking at this in a little bit more detail, you get 25 rushing yards from Pachenko in the first week, 22 in the second week. So it seems like they're using more of a committee. I have not looked at it in detail with Kareem Hunt, but maybe I can do that next time. Similarly with Cam, the first week you only had 2 carries, minus 3 rushing yards, so I'll look at who was the primary carrier in the first week. Second week you had 45 rushing yards with 11 carries, a little better that way, and a rushing touchdown. So it's hard to say with Cam because he's really only seems like he's had one major week. So just to satisfy our curiosity a little bit, I brought up the second string running backs. Same thing, no across the board, no fumbles. A little bit more fantasy points for Tyrone Tracy here over Kareem Hunt. Kareem gets on average 23.5, exactly the same amount. Has had 16 and 31 specifically in those weeks, and gets on average 6.5 receiving yards. Here's where it gets a little interesting. Tyrone Tracy actually only gets 19.5 on average receiving or rushing yards, but he does get 23.5 receiving yards on average. He's had 24 rush yards and 10 carries that first game, only 5 the second game. So I don't know if they're switching people up, if they're playing a committee, they're trying to figure out who should be there. I mean, I'd watch out for Singletary maybe playing third string, who could get some playing time. He had 9 and then 37 receiving yards. So maybe they just shifted this guy into more of a receiving back role too. It's kind of hard to say. And then the rest of the rush yards really do come from the quarterbacks here. So they end up overshadowing their own running backs because the share of the the share of the rushing yards is so spread out between all the running backs and the quarterbacks. If we look into our primary receivers here, we have the Malik Neighbors, who I think we all know is definitely top tier, 49.8 points in PPR. Thornton seems to be the next best one other than Hollywood Brown. Although what's interesting is I can't find Hollywood Brown in my list, so I don't know what that's about. I'll have to look that up a little bit more. But you also have Xavier Worthy out. So Juju Smith-Schuster is the other one that would take up this spot. But it looks like Thornton. I wanted to do Thornton because it looks like he does get the largest share in the end. But this could be messed up since I don't have Hollywood Brown to see what that would look like. But for what I can do, I'm going to go through this. We still have the averages. So season average, Thornton gets 50 reception yards per game. Malik Neighbors has averaged 119 per game. And a lot of that has been because of his second game where he got 167 yards receiving, got 71 in the first one. Definitely has shown up to be the primary receiver for Russell Wilson. But that second week definitely throws off the average. Vice versa, Thornton gets more average numbers, 41, 59. So that average is a little bit more consistent. And for fun, I brought up Smith-Schuster just to see kind of average receiving yards of 30. So he's supposed to be the backup first string. So he's the backup number one wide receiver. He's only got 30 receiving yards per game. He got that 55 in the first game, 5 in the second game. So it does look like Hollywood Brown and Thornton are your two top receivers for Kansas City right now with Xavier Worthy out. So for the game, that would make me a little concerned, saying that it's harder. He has less, maybe that maybe Mahomes has less people to throw to. That's easier to cover some of them potentially. So this could be a tough game for Kansas City in the end. And so with that, that's all I have for the night game. I hope you enjoy. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. I've tried to get this one out a little earlier so you actually have some time to watch it. And with all of that, let me know what you thought with a comment. Let me know if you wanted to see more or if there's something specific that you want to see. And otherwise, until next time, thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.